Welcome to Founders Unplugged, hosted by Greg McCallum. Long-form, honest conversations with founders and entrepreneurs from around the world. This is part 2 of this episode. Be sure to check out part 1 if you haven't already. Link in the description.
Well, let's go. Okay, good. Hello, welcome back to part 2 of my chat with Jen. Sorry, we're all in a bit of a kerfuffle because it stopped recording and then I had to record the outro for the part 1, and go and check out part 1. You'll have a bit of a giggle at the end. Thank you so much for being here, and thanks so much for part 1. You telling me about basically your journey, right? Your career, like from army through to investment banking, trading floor, loads of incredible, really impressive things that you've been up to, and some very challenging work. And then we were just talking at the end there about the sort of catalyst, what it was that sparked the idea for MyArc, which is your startup, which is your baby. And you just explained to me before we got cut off, actually, that 6 months of work not down the drain. I don't want to. I'm sure
it was pretty down the drain. There was a drain and it went there.
Okay, yeah. It was okay. Fair enough. I didn't want to just put words in your mouth in a negative light. Okay, so 6 months of work, and you had to scrap it. You had to make the difficult decision to scrap that. So then what? What did you end up doing at that point? Did you assemble another team? Did you start giving it a crack at it yourself? What was the game plan from that point onwards?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest shout out at this point needs to be to my co-founder, Kathy, who originally came on to work with me just, I think, a day or two a week. And then in January, when we were kind of going through all this decision-making process, I really couldn't have done it without her. Like, just not just the moral support component, but the kind of the critical thinking, the other opinion. I'm not somebody who would ever choose to work by myself. If I could win a competition, it wouldn't be by myself. It would be, our team winning versus another team. So that's kind of my default setting. But real credit needs to go to her for kind of weathering that process really well and being so additive to how we went about making those decisions and really helping, both of us to form what we did next. And I think there's a real lesson in there about never thinking that you have the answers yourself, and really just being appreciative of people who are around you with different views, different opinions. And actually it's the collaboration of those views and opinions that let you get to the better outcome.
So when you say, so did she join originally as a co-founder, or was it?
No, she joined originally.
Sort of became a...
Yeah, she joined originally, and then it was really over that Christmas period where we're kind of figuring out what to do. And then when we hit kind of this realization in that January that we were like, not going to work, we went through it together. And I think somebody once said to me that a co-founder, how you know the difference between a co-founder and an employee is if your chocolate, this is a weird analogy, it's not mine. If your chocolate and their chocolate, you just have more chocolate, and that's great. But if your chocolate, their peanut butter, then together you make Reese's peanut butter cookies or cups or whatever they're called in the States. And I think it's that thing where, the sum of the whole, it's not just the sum of the whole is greater than the parts. It's the sum of the whole allows you to do things that you couldn't do with just the parts by themselves. And that just really stuck with me when I heard it. And I think we came back after Christmas and, Kathy was like, right, because we were called something different. It's like, right, we need a different name. The name doesn't work. We need a different logo. We need, let's start from the beginning. We've had to bin everything. Let's start from the beginning. What are we actually trying to achieve, and how are we going to try and achieve this? Like, what are the problems we need to solve? And one of the biggest problems, because neither of us, I've worked in technology, but I'm by no means somebody who could build a product. We're like, right, what do we need to do to move this forward, and what are we trying to achieve? And so we went out, and we were incredibly fortunate in that we found the amazing Dr. Luke Hope, who we actually ended up writing 3 different employment contracts for 3 people that we almost brought on board. It turned out, fortunately, that we didn't have any trouble attracting people to the role. One of the things that VCs ask is, like, can you build a good team? I think between us, that's something we're pretty good at doing. I think the vision of what we're doing is pretty compelling. It's a really knotty technical challenge. So anybody who is technical and wanted to get their hands dirty and really do something slightly unprecedented, it really appealed to. I think what we learned first time around is that it's not that people are disingenuous about their abilities, it's that maybe they're not clear on what those abilities are. And there's a very big difference between being able to work in certain environments and then being able to work in other environments. And There's a huge amount. I'm not a big fan of the founder mode chat, but there's a huge amount about like, are you the sort of person who is a founder or are you not? And I don't think it's just in founder world. I think it's, are you the person that can be an elite athlete? Are you the sort of person who can work on an oil rig? Like, there's all sorts of different things that we need to do, but they have strong personality traits for a really good reason. And it's because sometimes you need to have that mental agility and that conviction and that drive that doesn't suit everybody. And thank God, because we don't need a world full of founders. It would be a complete frigging car crash. Like, we'd be thinking up loads of stuff and not getting, the basics, kind of the core foundations of what we do run. So I don't mean it in any way critical, but you do need to find people who have the right aptitudes for what you're looking to do. And certainly one of the people we wanted to hire, a really good guy, he said no to us because we couldn't offer him an extortionate amount of money. And actually, I think that worked out. That was a good outcome in the end for him and for us. I think he maybe wasn't the most positive person. And I think you need to have an element of positivity in founder world. One person
What was this? Was this really early on?
This was like in the February, March, we were trying to find a new CTO.
So we really, so that early on and someone's still asking for a huge amount of money.
They wanted like a big 6-figure salary. And I was like, dude, no, like that's just not an option.
Yeah. That's a fundamental misunderstanding or whether willfully or not of being an early stage startup. Like, that's not how it works, right?
No, and I think we made the mistake initially of kind of going through recruiters. We were, approached by a number of recruiters, and the problem with early stage startup is it has to be a conviction led thing, and if you are spending a huge runway on one salary, it creates a whole level of inequality in different ways. It just, there's a whole load of other things that are kind of problematic with it.
Of course, it has a cascading effect on things, not to mention the cash flow issue, which you've then got to make up by starting to generate revenue or getting a high level of investment even earlier. Yeah, absolutely.
And it starts driving the wrong behaviours. And I think the joy of having 25 years work experience, God, that's awful to say, isn't it? 25 years of work experience is the one, and my dad, actually, I credit my dad with this. And if you ever met my dad, do not expect him to say this. He is a proper like old school accountant. But I remember when I was 16, he said to me, business is all about people. And I remember at the time thinking, what a douche. Like, you're an accountant, dude. Like, what are you talking about? And there's a great Mark Twain quote that said, when I was 18, my father was very stupid. And by the time I was 21, he'd learnt a lot. And that one, and I can even, we stood in the patio in the house I grew up in when he said that to me. And I think about it a lot, which is, it doesn't matter whether you're building something that's technology or climate or, deep tech or anything else. You've got to sell something to people that solves the problem, and you've got to work with people to build something that solves the problem. And if you aren't aligned in what motivates you, what your outcomes are, what your objectives are, if you're not incentivized to go in the same direction, you're inherently trying to push water uphill. And it's something I saw a lot in bigger organizations. Is very rarely are people in a situation where their incentives are aligned. And that causes a huge amount of inefficiency in business. And it's something I feel really kind of strongly about, that actually if you can get to a point where people are universally aligned in the same direction, the likelihood of success and good outcomes is completely transformed. So anyway, a very waffly way of saying, we ended up saying no to these. Well, one guy said no to us because we weren't paying the money. And then we said no to another couple of guys, one of whom had a very, very high ego and a very low, going back to your earlier comments about banter, he was on the wrong side of that and was quite derogatory. Right. And so we're like, well, that's not going to bode well. And so we kind of stuck to our guns on it. And at one point I was like, God, we really are looking for this sort of magical unicorn that doesn't exist. We knew exactly what we wanted and we just couldn't find the right person. And we went on a platform that I'd recommend to everybody called Cord, CORD. And it basically is like a dating site for founders and technical people, whether you're a CTO or a junior developer, whoever else. And it was game changing. And you can put on there kind of what you're doing and who you're looking for. And Luke actually reached out to us and he wrote the most phenomenal response back. Lots of people just do kind of, generic responses. But it turned out that he wasn't responding to a lot of people. And so he took the time to write a really incredibly erudite articulation of why he was the right person for the role. And I was like, oh, this guy sounds good. And so he worked a day a week with us pro bono to test us out and for us to test him out. Because I think the one thing we cannot do is get this wrong again. And so in the interim, what Kathy and I did was we hired a dev agency in Vietnam that was recommended to me by one of my mentors. And we built effectively a proof of concept, like prototype web app, knowing that it was never going to be the long-term solution, but it meant it allowed us to keep the momentum and keep learning and keep iterating to the product. And it ended up being essential because we learned things about how we needed the data structure to work and the user journeys to work that we wouldn't have learned without that. And then with Luke, we were able to then effectively take those learnings and then in September a year ago, actually finally started building the product that we now call Noah, because Luke's dog's called Noah. We actually started building the proper product based on the learnings that we'd had in the preceding months.
Right. Yeah. One hell of a journey. And you said the product's called Noah.
Oh, we in-house. Nobody else calls it Noah. We nicknamed it Noah.
Because at one point, right. Okay.
Yeah, because at one point we were dealing with the version that was being built by our Vietnam team, which was the web app, which was our kind of like, how do we get the data structures to work? We're solving a very knotty problem. So we needed to figure out how to solve that knotty problem. And that was kind of a cheaper, quicker, easier way of solving some of the problems. Concurrently with building some of the very emergent tech, which is sort of what we've ended up building. So rather than getting confused with version 1, version 2, we ended up calling him Noah.
Right, give me a code name. That's a very military thing to do.
It was Luke's idea, to be fair, but yeah, it is a very military thing to do. Operation Noah, but yeah.
Operation Noah, yeah. Okay, so then let's get to the meat and potatoes of it, as they say, because if I haven't really given you the opportunity to explain exactly what the platform, the product does. So why don't you take as much time as you need. Give us an elevator pitch or the full pitch. It's entirely up to you, but help me understand.
Cool, absolutely. So we call our product, effectively, it's two halves of a product, and they've got the data wizard and the data wallet. And so the customer journey goes that problem statement number 1, you want to get a better product or service. So you want to change your energy provider. You want to get an insurance product. You want to get a home insurance renewal quote. And from a consumer perspective, it's grotty. It's really shit. And nobody's really solved how to enable onboarding, because you need a huge amount of data to get a mortgage, a loan, an insurance policy, etc. And the so what for businesses is the average abandonment rate. So the number of, you spend a huge amount of money. So Confused, for example, spends £75 million a year on marketing to get all of those lovely hot leads. And then they lose 75% of those hot leads through the onboarding process because the onboarding process is so grotty. And so what we've done with our technology, because we have a proprietary AI language model, not large language model, it's non-generative, so it's exceptionally accurate, and we don't produce hallucinations, which is mega important for particularly anything to do with kind of finance, banking, regulated products, is you can embed our API into a customer onboarding journey. So the comparison site or getting a mortgage or opening a savings account. And instead of the customer having to type in their information, you can simply scan or upload a previous policy or bank account or mortgage statement. And we use our own proprietary AI to read that document with this exceptional level of accuracy. And then we auto-complete that form. And the so what is that we reduce the time to onboard by, depending on the use case, average about 90%. And we remove the top 3 reasons for abandonment, which are it's too frustrating, it's too time consuming, or you're being asked questions you don't know the answer to, like what's your BT account reference number? And so that product is now live. We have our first customer, which we're working with at the moment, which is super exciting. And we're in conversation we've got a really healthy kind of pipeline, a really exciting pipeline for that product in its own right.
Hi, a friendly reminder to share this episode with your network, like and subscribe. And if you are feeling really supportive, please consider reviewing the show on the podcast platform of your choice. It all really helps support what we do. Thank you. Now back to the show.
That is effectively just the beginning of the kind of MyArc journey. After that, depending on the use case, so if you're a comparison site, you probably don't want the next bit, but if you are a mortgage broker, you probably do. At the end of that journey, very much like if you make a payment with your card with Stripe say to you, do you want to save the data for later? Because there's nothing more annoying than entering in losing your wallet, trying to figure out where your bank card is, typing in the long number on the back and all of that kind of jazz. So Stripe say you can save that for later and then autofill, and it works really well. And so we do the same thing. So you've gone through this painful onboarding journey. It's less painful because you just had to scan a document rather than worry about anything or type in 6 minutes of data. And we then say you can save that data for later. And so we use some very cool technology that's quite new that allows us to pull that data and then autofill it into an app should you choose to download an app. And that app is the MyArc data wallet. And then within the data wallet, we can build your data profile. So you can connect open banking and we're FCA approved. You can connect emails. So we have the first passive email rendering solution, which basically means that if you get a BT phone bill into your email overnight, you never need to worry about it because we will read the email, we will read the attachment, we will transform the unstructured and structured data, we'll auto set reminders if the tariff is coming up to end, and we'll add that into your data wallet. We also have a unique methodology for sharing data. So very rarely do people live in isolation. So if you have a joint phone bill account, for example, what you don't want to do is have one person have that information, the other person have the information, and never the twain shall meet. And so what we've created is a solution in which you can co-manage your household information with your partner. And then let's say you have an elderly parent, I can co-manage my dad's household information with him if he needs to, but without my husband having to see it. And then you can use that for cars, homes, etc. And so we're really building that data profile within the data wallet. And the bit so that's data in, data stored and grown. And then the bit that we're currently working on is the data out. So we want to get to a point where in the same way that you can make a payment in most providers with Apple Pay, you can make a data sharing, you can enable data sharing with the data wallet. And we can do that both by partnering with businesses and allowing an API from the wallet into them so that we autofill without somebody having to scan a document because the data's already there. Or we also have the facility to effectively operate as like a robot, filling out the form. So even if we haven't got a relationship with the provider you're looking to complete a form for, we can still then share the data out of your wallet and auto-populate that onboarding journey with no manual entry. And really the whole piece of it is to say, businesses can't offer products with a level of ease that they want to because they need too much information. And any form that takes over 100 seconds loses half of the people trying to complete it. So businesses are worse off, customers are worse off. And we talk about the aligned incentives. Actually, why don't we build a product that benefits both businesses and customers so that you can eradicate that problem? Businesses can offer customers better outcomes and customers can get better outcomes.
Yeah, right. And that's... So you've got quite a few, well, you've got three main offerings there by the sounds of it. So two that are currently operational, one sounds fairly recent, and then a third that you're working on, which is that last piece there. So this might seem like a bit of a left field question, sort of in terms of relating it to investment, right? But how do you convey a vision that has those three elements to it without it seeing... Because this is just from stories, but either seeing too ambitious or not focused, or do you know what I mean? Because we're always told, especially by people who advise for fundraising, keep it focused, one revenue stream, one product. How do you are you able to express a sort of deep tech solution, or ambition and vision for something in a way that still provides confidence that you're going to remain focused and deliver things kind of in sequence?
Yeah, I think it's the right question to ask, and it's something we could have done a lot better on. Nobody has questioned the ambition or the market opportunity that this brings. There's 507 million people use Apple Pay. So there's a huge market opportunity. And if we're thinking about the Apple Pay for data and the number of ways in which that can be leveraged, opportunity is not in question, but it's a big, hairy, audacious move. And so when I said at the beginning, people thought we couldn't do it. It's like, well, lots of people have tried to solve consumer data and nobody's quite cracked it. And I think we've come at it from a very different angle, which is we've come at it from the data being consolidated at consumer rather than consolidated at business. So the traditional Equifax, Experian, they pull data together in spite of the customer. The customer doesn't even know how much data they hold or what the data is. That data is then sold, and it's not massively accurate. So there's only 30% consistency in credit defaults for customers across the top 3 credit reference agencies rather. And so there's some challenges with that. And the FCA are kind of hot on that space and trying to kind of improve outcomes there. I think the joy of starting with the customer holding the data is that you get a natural kind of validation screen, and the person then consolidates it and it's stored on an app on their phone. And I think, again, that's something when you say, right, you can have Apple Pay to make a payment super complicated, customer experience super simple. When you talk about having the data equivalent for that, people are like, oh, yeah, that kind of makes sense. I get that because I hate filling in my home insurance renewal quote. Wouldn't it be great if I could just do it with one tap? And so I think from that perspective, we don't seem to have too much of a challenge. I think the piece that...
Yeah, the value proposition of that is incredibly clear, right?
I think the bit that we've really had to work on, we really focus on, particularly for like the last few months, has been how do you get to that point, right? So, how do you get to the point where you've got people using that app? How do you make it something that is indispensable as Apple Pay is? And so what is the go-to-market strategy along that piece? And so because we have a lot of complicated technology, and that's been one of the challenges we've had when talking to investors, is they're like, oh, I don't, it's just a lot and it's all a bit clever and a bit confusing. In summary, the way that we kind of look at it is you need to be able to have a very secure home, a very secure wallet in which you can store this data and that you can cumulatively build on that data. And then how you do it is sort of secondary, and we can go into that detail. But effectively, like any good wallet, you put your first credit card in, you get another one, you add another one in. And what you want it to be is the right storage house for those cards or for wherever else you put it in. So again, we see like the app very much as that wallet, that storage solution for data as you put it in. But you don't want to have one storage solution for one credit card and then another wallet for another credit card. Like that makes no sense. You want to have it all consolidated. So you need to have a nice secure vessel that you can consolidate, a fit for purpose wallet. And so we've got that. And then the next question is, well, how do you get those credit cards in the first place? How do you get those that data into the wallet? And you can do it one of two ways. And one is very costly and time consuming. And the other one is actually, well, one of the things that we found when we were talking to potential customers about our proposition is the bit that has appealed so much to so many is the ability to get data into systems. So we're talking to a number of mortgage broker platforms at the moment. If anybody's got a mortgage, you know how much data there is. And what happens at the moment is you email your mortgage broker your bank statement, your credit card details, your insurance document, your pay slips, your everything else. And there are these great platforms that mortgage brokers can use to manage that process and to get the best quotes for you. But there's this real sort of void between how you get those emails and those dumb data documents, that unstructured data, into that platform. And so we're solving a very, very specific problem, which is how you get the data from A to B. And then after you've got it in, you can do anything you want with it, blah, blah, blah. But it's literally that unstructured and structured data, and then the population of that data in a useful way. And so in the very first instance, we've sort of carved out our proprietary AI to enable that piece of the pie. And so you're actually targeting both businesses and customers where their greatest pain is, which is that conversion, that abandonment, that activation piece. And you're then enabling people, very much like Stripe did, to save the data for later. You're just enabling to store the data. So the way we analogize that with the data, with the data wallet, is that you have to get the credit card anyway. But when you've got the credit card, you then just want somewhere to store it. So we don't think of it in any other way other than it literally is like a wallet where you need to get a credit card, a bit of a pain. But when you've got it, you need to secure it somewhere safely, and then you need it to be readily available for when you next use it. I think part of the challenge is to enable that to happen. There's a huge amount of complexity that we've had to solve to do so. But really all we're doing is saying, you need data. We target you when your pain is greatest. We take that pain away, and then we allow you to benefit from that new process again and again and again.
Yeah. So do it once, and then you won't have to do it as many times, basically, because it's done one and done. Yeah. Yeah. So when you've had to sell the vision of MyArc to other stakeholders, whether that's, employees along the way, co-founders and then investors, have you been leading with the grander vision first of what you ultimately want to build, and then saying, and this is how we're going to get there, basically, and it's going to be, we'll launch this first, we launch that first, and so on, like you said, to build the wallet, to accumulate that data, to solve those problems, to then get to the point where you can achieve the ultimate goal of the end product.
I think it depends very much on who we're talking to, and again, I'm not saying we get this right by any stretch of the imagination, but not all investors are created equal. So when you're looking for investment, you're looking for what stage people are investing at, what they're most interested in, what their thesis says, how they want you to monetize, and where they are in terms of deployment cycle, who they've had in their portfolio before, have the people in the portfolio been successful or not been successful, because that really colors how they want you to convey the information. And I think what we try and do is, for us, the overall thing is very simple, right? We take away the pain of onboarding, we allow you to save the data for later, and then we take the pain away from onboarding again, which means that businesses are able to sell faster, quicker, cheaper, and therefore grow revenue. Where we start, I think, depends very much on the VC or the angel or the investor we're talking to. So some VCs are very much, we want the moonshot, we want the big vision, and then it's really easy to start with, we can eradicate abandonment for everybody because we can enable seamless data sharing from consumer to business, and increase revenues significantly. Other VCs and angels, the way they kind of come across anyway is a higher level of comfort with what is your go-to-market, how are you going to talk about your phases to go there. And so we start with actually, we've got a huge amount of traction in our first phase, which is enabling businesses to eradicate abandonment. And then the story just gets better and better and better, because we can eradicate abandonment once. And then once we've eradicated abandonment once, actually, you've been through that pain. We allow you to consolidate that data in this nice little wallet, and then you can eradicate abandonment again and again and again. And so, it does. And again, whether we're getting that right, whether we should be, universal in the way we talk to it, I don't know. But
I think that sounds sensible to me. I mean, you've got to adjust all of your conversations. And I mean, that's, as you probably well know, I mean, that's the same in sales. It's the same with any kind of pitching, right? You've got to know your audience and adjust. That's just a good way. That's public speaking. That's sales. That's everything, isn't it? I mean, you've got to adjust to your audience. So that makes sense. And to be completely transparent, I'm actually asking for not just out of curiosity, but also very selfish reasons, because of my startup, which is it's come out of stealth literally today.
Oh,
I put a post on LinkedIn about it. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it was the worst kept secret anyway. I was telling everyone about it, but it's officially out of stealth for whatever that's worth. I don't even know what that means these days. Although at the time this comes out, it'll be weeks after the fact. But and we're going to be announcing our seed raise soon, and I have a similar kind of conundrum. We've got such big plans, solving, I would say a couple of problems, but, with deep tech solutions that mean creating a set of products to get to our ultimate goal, which is further down the line, which means multiple revenue streams, which, just to some traditional investors, that seems scary, because not only is it quite an ambitious very futuristic next gen problem to be solving overall, but also, multiple revenue streams, this, that, and the other. It seems unfocused. And that's always been my biggest concern. And in working and interacting with the advisors I work with, there's been some concern expressed there. Others not so much. Obviously, it's always a mixed bag with advisors. I should know, I am one. But so I am asking for that sort of selfish reason too. Just being curious as to what others do.
I think one observation. I think one observation, and it's really interesting that you're kind of having that, is. And again, I get myself in trouble for saying the wrong thing, so I have to be mindful of how I say this. I think if you think about what VC was invented to do, it was to back the moonshots, right? It was to back the opportunities that couldn't be delivered without additional funding. I think there is now, and I'm not the only person to say this, I think there's quite a lot of content out there at the moment on this. I think there's post the last few years, there has been a move from VC into more of a private equity mindset, which is
right.
Here is a rule book that we stick to, and I want the moonshot, but actually what's more important to me is I don't lose money. And I think what we have found on talking to different organizations is there are some who are very VC minded, and there's a number who are very private equity minded. And I think that's a really interesting observation, and one that I didn't expect to be the case. And I don't think was the case maybe 3 or 4 years ago, but certainly is the case now. And I'm a total data geek, right? So if you look at the statistics, generally in times of distress, people revert to type. Again, very well researched. I think some data came out recently that 80% of investments made in 2023 were second-time founders.
I've just got to quickly interrupt this episode for a quick announcement, and that is that if you are a tech founder, a CEO, a business owner, well, the chances are that's probably why you're listening to this show. It is called Founders Unplugged after all. And if that's the case, then you really need to listen to what I've got to say. So look, as someone that's been in the tech startup world now for a very, very long time, and as a founder and worked with lots of businesses globally, working in those companies has taught me a really big lesson. And that is that finding the right tools for your team can truly change your business. That's why I'm really excited that today's episode is sponsored by Deal. That's Deel. It's an all-in-one platform for global teams. Deal is designed with the needs of a global workforce in mind. Seamless contract signing, easy expense uploads, in-platform time-off management. They can handle paperwork, exchange foreign salaries into local ones, and ensure compliance with local regulations, and loads more. Plus, its customer support team is available 24/7, and that is really, really important. If you're ready to see how Deal can transform your global operations, head to deal.com. That's DEEL.com to book your demo today. So thank you so much for Deal for sponsoring today's episode. You can use the link in the description or the QR code on the screen down there somewhere. And now we'll get back to the episode.
We've gone from the heady heights of about 1.9% going to women, and we've gone back down to less than 1%. If you're a person of color, if you're a woman of color, you're screwed. And so, if we look at those data points, they're retrograde. They're going in the wrong direction, not the right direction. And I think when anybody is, as an individual under duress because you're getting shouted at by, the Texan fireman's pension fund that's funded your fund because you've not hit targets, or you've had an 85% devaluation of your biggest holding in your company, people naturally will want to kind of go intra, not extra. And so it doesn't really surprise me, with all of that taken into account, that there is more of a mindset, a more formulaic mindset than I maybe naively expected kind of coming into this space. And I think the people who really have that moonshot vision are the ones who have been able to build portfolios where those moonshots have really paid off. I think the ones where there is more conservatism, for want of better articulation, it is maybe where they've had less success with the moonshots, and actually it becomes easier to go, right, well, this guy's ex-MIT, he was a founder before, and you saw it in hiring in 2009. So I remember in 2009 when we were trying to hire some people into banking, and instead of hiring the best candidate, people were hiring the candidate they weren't going to get sacked for hiring. This guy's worked at JP Morgan, he's got this, he's done that. So therefore, if I hire him and he goes wrong, I'm not going to be shot, because everything is kind of worrying. But before that, when there was more fat in the land,
on paper it makes sense.
Yeah, and it's like, this guy doesn't work out. Well, nobody can criticize me because he ticked all the boxes. And I think it really, for me, it's very reminiscent of 2009, that kind of mindset. So I think there's an endemic mindset around that. I think there's also, a very high caliber of startups out there. So it's not you trying to get investment, it's you trying to, and have a great founder kind of community I'm part of, but you're up against some really friggin' awesome people for the same pot of money. And the caliber seems to be so high. And I think that's really exciting, but it's articulating why you're a better punt than somebody else is part of it. And when you add that complexity to it, there's just more reasons you can fail. So if you've got two really great propositions and one is more likely to fail than another, then I think it makes perfect sense that people go for and I don't mean easier option in a derogatory way, I mean it in a kind of a very credible way. And it's something that we've been hyper aware of and are trying to really focus on having that really clear route to market, proving our market validation, talking about it as a phased process, talking about it as the product is very consistent. And then it's just as simply, it's different stages of growth. And the analogy actually, and then I'll take a breath. The analogy we're talking about is Amazon. Like if Bezos had ever gone and said, I'm going to sell everything from party bags to houses to books to whatever else, everybody would have laughed him out the building. And they laughed him out the building anyway, just saying he was going to digitize book selling. And how much of it is what his whole plan was, or how much of it is post storytelling. But the intention apparently was that it was always going to be much more than books, but he chose one place to start and then grew forward. And so we do question ourselves a lot, like, should we be talking about the whole vision, or should we be talking about phase one? Because there's pros and cons to both.
Yeah, exactly. Because otherwise because the con to that is it doesn't seem ambitious enough, and it's not going to get people excited, and then conversely the other one. But yeah, I mean, look, what you mentioned there is a bit of a conundrum too, because I totally understand it from both ends of the aisle. It makes sense to be a bit more conservative in tough times. Funds are businesses too. You've got to play it safe. And if going with, it's not malicious, right? It's not like people are sat there going, do you know what? Let's not invest in people of color or black people today. I think there's some. I've been criticized for saying people of color before, so I'm being careful with that. Black people or women or whatever. It's not that. That's not what's happening. It just so happens that unfortunately, for whatever reason, the demographic is that. So I think it's important for us to all be mindful. It's not. I don't think it's people making insidious decisions here. It is, as you pointed out, people trying to de-risk in whatever way they can, and often saving their skin, because it's going through so many layers of individuals who are all potentially on the chopping block if things go wrong. Like you said, like with the hiring example, it's like you just don't want to be that person on the chopping block. Everyone's just trying to survive, right? So, but I'm also hearing that the States, has always been a little bit more willing to embrace those moonshots, those bigger risk, not necessarily bigger risk, but just more ambitious, I guess, they're slightly, investing in a bit more sort of dreamer-like founders. And from what I'm hearing, that's still the case. And I think it's also a bit of it's not necessarily a new problem for Europe. It's a bit of an old problem that's just kind of, if anything, got more conservative, especially given the current economic climate, like you pointed out, for many reasons. But I think that's always a problem that we've had in this country. So someone explained it to me the other day, for example, by it was on this show actually. Someone explained it to me the other day by saying that in the UK we just seem to have historically a problem with backing the winners. We don't like it when people win, whereas in the States it's the complete opposite. There's a huge rally behind people who win. And it has been for a very long time. And there's pride in the backing of the winner. whereas in the UK, it's all about the underdog. Do you know what I mean? And so it's an interesting mindset that I think bleeds over into the investment landscape and the startup ecosystem at large. And I think it's quite a deep-rooted psychological one, really in our culture, especially in the UK, where, maybe we're a bit like, we see someone trying to be overly ambitious and we're like, all right, calm down, mate.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's like, just take a seat. Like, and I think that's a problem for this space, because you need to have more of that, I think, American mindset of just like go big or go home, because that's what we have as founders, and we want people to match that energy. So I've been tempted to do the whole Delaware flip thing, and
yeah,
and who knows, maybe we will. We'll see how it goes. But but the thing is, I mean, you managed it, right? So you must have got the message across to the right people.
I don't know, actually. I don't think we have got the message across to the right people yet. I think what we've done is we were told that it couldn't be built, which, as we said at the beginning, is like red rag triple. So, and it took us time, right? Like I said, we screwed up the first time around and we had to sack it off entirely. We then had to build, a known interim solution, which I guess is the right thing to do in reflection, and then build the product we have now. And we've arguably built phase 2 before phase 1 in some ways. But we know from here on in that we've got the foundation right, and we know it's technically possible to do everything that we want to do. And that is a really exciting place to be. I think the bit that we have yet to do is to get people to be like, this is inevitable. And I read it in an article a while back that you really want people to get to a point where there is the conviction there, because it feels inevitable. It feels like, even if it's not these guys doing it, this is going to get done. And I think that's the storytelling. But I think we've realized that we're challenging a number of perceived norms, which again takes people longer to get their heads around. So for us, a couple of them are, one, data as an asset needs to be held. You have to hold all the data yourself so you can sell it. And that's not true. We've proven it's not true, but there's such a perceived norm that you're actually having to kind of take people through a journey to understand the alternatives. And I think the other piece very much is that you have to hold that data in spite of the customer. So it's not just that you have to hold it, but you need to have kind of one up to then be able to sell to them. And again, we don't think that that's the case. And then on top of that, we've used a culmination of quite emergent technologies across privacy tech, AI. We're taking quite a different approach using our AI, which is non-generative. It's not a large language model that has really good economic benefits. So I think one thing that we've found, and again, we're still learning, is to articulate the solution. People don't get it, so like, how is that possible? So you then end up going into too much detail, which then means people have to go on a learning curve about technologies and systems and approaches they've never heard of before. And whilst I absolutely hear you that people aren't, don't go in and go, oh, I'm going to wake up and be sexist today. There's a huge amount of data on the questions that women get asked versus the questions that men. Maybe some people do, but let's give humanity like benefit of the doubt. The questions that women, the questions that women are asked are all based around risk. And it's super hard to sell an opportunity and get people excited and buy into that moonshot vision if all of your questioning is around risk and about downside. Whereas generally for men, there's a great TED talk on this as well, for men, the questions are around opportunity and where it's going to go. And so it's much easier to sell something if you're talking about scale, opportunity, revenue, international expansion. And so when you do the analysis of how those questions are asked and the way the conversation goes, it's two very, very different conversations. And so I completely agree with you about kind of the American mindset. It's very much from a British perspective, like, who do you, and we've been told this, like, who are you to think that you can do this? Why do you think you can crack this thing that other people have failed? And so you're kind of coming against that mindset a lot, which is, other people couldn't do this. How dare you have the audacity to be the ones that think that they can? It's a very tricky path to walk, because you're like, on one hand, you want to say, well, we've done it. And on the other hand, you don't want to come across as a douchebag. So I hear you very much on the difference with the American mindset.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in some ways, I first of all think that I have cracked that that bit you said about sort of making it sound inevitable. I think
Nice,
that's
well done.
one. That's probably the bit about the. Yeah, I think that's the bit about the pitch that I am most proud of, and actually, I think it was probably the easiest thing to put together.
Cool.
Because if for us in a way, I think that the rest of it's actually harder. But because of the problem that we're going to be solving, like that was the easier bit to start off with, actually. But what was my point in telling you that? So that was fine. But then the oh god, I've completely lost my train of thought after telling you that.
Talk about who do you think you are to be the ones to solve this?
Yes, that was it. I didn't. Yeah, the point wasn't just to gloat. Yeah, but I
well
do think
done.
there is a. There was yeah, thanks. That was it. End of show. No, yeah. So I think that was good. But I think there is an element, ironically, of that which I do think I'm not afraid to come across as a bit of a dick about it. Like to say we're going to solve this problem that no one else is currently solving. Like I'm very prepared to be quite brazen about that, and I don't really care if it rubs up VCs the wrong way, because I think if it does, then that's perfect, because it means I know that I don't want their involvement. I want someone to see past the brazenness and to understand that level of confidence is key for us to succeed. That there has to be a level of blind confidence in our ability to crush it, to the point where it can come across as a slight amount of arrogance. I think there has to be a certain amount of arrogance in trying to solve a big problem with a deep tech solution. Like, so do you know what I mean? For me, it almost feels like a bit of a test. It's like, I am going to be a bit of a dick in the way that I explain why I think I'm the one to lead this awesome team that I've assembled to solve this problem that no one else can see and is solving. Like, there has to be a certain amount of inherent, you know what I mean? So for me, that's kind of a bit of a test to it, which, you know, I'm not inherently comfortable doing. But I think I have to. I'm prepared to force myself to be comfortable doing it.
Good for
in
you.
order to get the result that I think we need to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I think it's something that we maybe haven't done as well. Is having.
Well, I mean, look, this isn't a suggestion. It's just
having that kind of shameless.
Yeah, shameless. And I think,
and it's interesting because I think it's got to be the opposite of arrogance, because arrogance only leads you down the wrong path generally. Like, hubris is I think the most dangerous trait that somebody can have.
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, hubris is awful, but there is an element of kind of like almost insanity that you need to have that puts you in the situation that you find yourself. To your point, you could, and I've been asked lots of times, like, you were doing well before, like you were actually earning money, and you kind of had, like, on paper a good career and all this kind of, like, what the heck are you doing? And I was like, yeah, but this is fun. Yeah. This is more fun, and this is a big knotty problem. And I really think we can solve it. And we've got to the point now where we know we can solve it from a technology perspective. And so the next bit is solving it from a distribution perspective, which we're really starting to do. And it's like everything with startups. It's like, how much do you want to go from an investment perspective, or do you want to try and bootstrap for as long as you can? And when do you need the money, and what's your runway? And it's just all of those different levers. It's a giant financial model. It's the different levers that you have to play off against itself, and you've got to make some decisions on it. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right about being brazen to go into it, and well done on I might pick your brains afterwards on how you got the inevitability across. Because I think one thing we certainly think is that it's absolutely insane that we are where we are with customer data. We need to find a way of making it feel like it is truly inevitable. I think part of the problem is it's Y Combinator have something that they call a tar pit. I don't know if you've heard that before.
Yeah.
I think it's a Paul Graham exercise. So for people that don't know, it's it looks like this great fertile lake of opportunity, but you actually rock up and it's an oil pit. And the problem is, by the time you've got there, everybody's thirsty, and then they die, and you get loads of dead animals around what you thought was a lovely watering hole, and is actually just a pile of tar. But I think what changes a tar pit is when situations fundamentally change, like technology. So we couldn't have built this 2 years ago, and the technology we used didn't exist. And so it's how you take people on a journey to say, look, I know you've invested loads of money in something like this before, and I know it didn't work, and it was a tar pit, but now actually the tar pit doesn't exist anymore because situation change. But again, it's just a harder, it's a harder conversation. It's more of a kind of this is why it's changed, and then you get more into the technical conversation rather than the storytelling. And it's the storytelling that people buy, not the intricacies of the tech.
Yeah, and I suppose the storytelling aspect of things for me has always come quite naturally, which is why I ended up going in sales for as long as I did in the earlier part of my career, and then running sales teams and all that, and up to this point now worked with hundreds of startups to actually help refine that. I don't know why, for whatever reason, I've had kind of a natural ability to be given, right, okay, this is our product and this is our target market and these are the problems we solve. We just don't know how to make it all gel. We don't know how to put it into narrative, and I can just do it, and it just comes naturally to me. I think I don't know entirely what it is, but I have a feeling I've always had an interest in narrative storytelling in a way, but I think it's an understanding of just what on a base level people resonate with. Do you know what I mean? Like you mentioned about the problem that you're solving for that customer. What is the pain point? What is that sticky? It's like, for whatever reason, you give me a group of people, you give me a technology or whatever, and I can just make those connections. Okay, that's the starting point. You start from here, you start from there. There has to be an emotional thread. There has to be something that people can hold on to. And then, depending on the audience you tell it to, you maybe cater slightly as well. You start at a different point, in the same way that sometimes a good movie might start with the ending, or whatever. Like there's different ways to do it for different scenarios.
If you are enjoying this episode and want to support the show, please subscribe with notifications turned on, and let us know your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. This lets YouTube know we are doing something right. Back to the show.
So I think that's a really useful thing. But it's it's very difficult to do it for yourself. So I am awful, for example, at and I've always been awful at pitching myself, in job interviews, for example. I'm terrible at job interviews. Awful. I try everything I could to get out of them because I was so bad at them. And instead I would manage to get around them by saying, can I take you out for a coffee? Or let's go for a beer. And instead I would just sort of manufacture my own environment to let it happen. It's much more difficult on something you've built, 100%, which is why sometimes it's quite useful to have an outsider do it.
You've got to have outsiders. No, it's important.
Yeah, it does help. Yeah. But enough about me. Look, I know we've gone slightly over time. I was wondering, would you be able to indulge me with one more thing for 5 more minutes?
Yeah,
is that okay?
Course.
Is that all right? Thank you. I appreciate it. So look, I wanted to ask you this. You've obviously had a hugely interesting journey, like we talked about in part 1 and at the beginning of this part 2. I really want to get your impression of of what it was to be a founder versus, before you were one, versus now that you've been one for, a not insignificant amount of time now. And has that opinion changed significally, do you think?
I'm going to use an analogy on this one, if you will bear with me.
I like a good analogy.
So I've got 2 kids, and I was later to the table having kids. And so I have a lot of extraordinary friends, particularly women, super successful women, who had kids and who have dealt with all sorts of very challenging environments. And all of them were flawed by parenthood. And I remember having a conversation with my husband going, we're pregnant, we're having our kid. I was like, I have no idea why it's so hard. Logically, my head can't get around why this floors people so much. But I respect these people so much that if it's flawed them, I'm sure it will floor me. It just doesn't make rational sense as to why it's so, such a big gig. And then, we had my son, he had colic and he had reflux and all this other stuff. And I was like, oh, yep, I know now how that feels. And I think I felt exactly the same. And I think I used the analogy from the beginning with going into founder life, which is a humility that I have absolutely no idea what I'm getting myself into. An expectation that it's going to be really hard. I think part of the problem I've had is I've had a lot of hard before, both on a professional and personal level. And so I have a high level of conviction in my ability to deal with hard. And my ability to go into things that I don't know what I'm doing and kind of figure it out. So I had a high level of conviction in the fact that even though I knew I didn't know what it was going to be like, that I would be able to deal with it, knowing that it would be hard. I think the the environment that exists now is very different from when I first started thinking about this a couple of years ago. The whole VC space has changed a lot. And I think we've been, there's always good times and bad times, but we've been unfortunate that we've been operating in a time when there's been this sort of really constricting ecosystem, as opposed to 2020 when it was growing. And I think lots of commentary is that kind of come next year, Q1, Q2, things are starting to look a little bit more positive. And so you're kind of operating in that crunch zone. And that can, I left the military in 2008. People were like, what the heck are you doing, you crazy person? Like, there's never been worse job in job security, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think, there can be an easier way of doing it, and there can be a harder way of doing it. I think we've gone about it the hardest possible way. And if I was going to do it again, I would take an easier path, I think, as in like I'd have the knowledge to take it a more direct path. And so I didn't expect the kind of the ecosystem to change as much as it has, but I did expect founder life to be hard. I expected it to be omnipresent, in that, I dream about what we're building. I wake up, it's the first thing I think about. It's the last thing I think about before I go to sleep. I don't sleep very much. I work long hours. But again, that's been my 25 years of working life, has been going to bed thinking about work, waking up thinking about work, etc. So that for me maybe hasn't been as much of a shift as it is for others. So a long way of answering your question, which is it's what I expected it to be, in as much as I expected it to be anything, knowing that I didn't have a clue what I was getting myself into.
That begs one brief follow-up question then. You mentioned about like the expectations, if I not to misquote you, so correct me if I'm wrong, but the expectations of yourself to deal with difficult situations is pretty high by the sounds of it. So then how do you deal with it when you fail, when you don't succeed at something, or when something doesn't go your way? Are you equally as hard on yourself in that situation, or are you able to forgive yourself fairly easily?
No, I'm awful. I'm absolutely awful. I'm a nightmare. I'm a nightmare for my co-founders. I'm a nightmare for my husband. I'd be completely lying if I said, I'm really good at like forgiving myself, and I take failure really well.
It's a double-edged sword, right? Because,
Yes,
it's great to have those high standards to want, because of the drive and everything there is very, very important. But yeah, it does mean that falling hurts that little bit more, right? Potentially.
Yes and no. I think I am very hard on myself. And I have been told that repeatedly for years and years and years. And I've tried to change it, and then I failed, and I've sort of now given up. I think what I do recognize is that failure is part of the journey. So I expect failure. I just don't like it. But what I do expect of myself is to keep going.
Yeah.
So
that's the key, isn't it?
Yeah. I hate failing. I'm really bad at it, but I do genuinely expect it to be the case. But I think there's also good failure and bad failure. So when I've run teams, I've always spoken about having an imaginary whiteboard, and it's the mistakes whiteboard. And you've got good mistakes and you've got bad mistakes, because what you really want is the longest possible list of good mistakes, because it means you're trying, you're thinking outside the box, you're trying to figure out how to solve a problem, you're taking initiative, you're getting on with it, you're learning. Like, good mistakes are integral to good teams and businesses and everything else. Bad mistakes, you don't want any. So bad mistakes are the mistakes you make when you know that you're not doing the right thing, or when there's that kind of grotty feeling inside, or when you've not bothered to think about it enough and it was an avoidable mistake if you've just thought about it a little bit harder. So I'm very forgiving of good mistakes, but I'm very unforgiving of bad mistakes, and more so with me than with anybody else. So if we fail because of good mistakes, I'm okay with it ish, still don't like failing. If we fail because of bad mistakes, then that I struggle with a lot.
Yeah, no, that's good. I like that. And I mean, I suppose it just to throw something else in there, which I'm sure you've already thought of, but something that I personally use as a pretty stringent data set for myself is actually, it's the velocity of time to come out of the mistake and into a better place that I consider to be a really, really important sort of part of the journey. So, whether that's for myself personally, or for team members, or us as a collective, or any organization I've ever worked with, et cetera, et cetera. It's like, because mistakes are an inevitable part of that journey. Like you've said, teams, people, and whatever are going to make them the standard, the sort of the bit of data that I consider to be the really, really important one, that is kind of the metric of our success and how we can predict, and to some extent, and project what the overall competence of an organization and a team, and what our success is going to be plotted on, is the speed in which we manage to get back on track. So to dissect that, learn from it, and move on, and get to the next part, and then get to that next win. I think that window there, that's really interesting. And as long as that's pretty short, I think you're in a good place. It's when that it fluctuates wildly, or when it's consistently, meaning people are wallowing in it, people are not learning from it quick enough. That to me is a big problem. That's an indication of probably some very deep-seated, hardly embedded issues with people, processes, you name it, right? So that's just to throw my 10 cents in there for whatever it's worth.
No, I really like that. I think I wholeheartedly agree with that sentiment. I actually think it's something that just when you were talking, I was thinking, actually, I think we're pretty good at that. But interestingly, just final comment, in the military, they have something called milling, which if you try and join the paras or special forces, milling, basically they throw two kids in a ring and get them to punch each other. And the person that wins isn't necessarily the person who you would think wins. The person who often wins is the one who keeps going. And the whole point of it is they want to see that when you're under this horrible, and I never had to do it, just for the record, when you're in this horrible situation, you're being pummeled by somebody else who might be quite a lot bigger and stronger than you, you can still win if you keep going, if you keep trying to stand up, if you keep finding a way through and have that grit. And that's what they care about more than, if you're a trained boxer and you go into the ring and you do well, it's like, well, you've not proven anything. You haven't proven that when you take the hit, you can get back up and keep going. And I've not thought about that for years, but just hearing you talk just now made me think that a big part of founder mindset is kind of taking the knock and then just going, and cracking on with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's real strength. And it's not just, I think, as a founder, but as a human being, because if shit is always going to be thrown your way, that is life. There is no promise or contract that you sign at the beginning of life to say, I am entitled to happiness and I shall be happy consistently. You know what I mean? That doesn't exist.
I like that, though.
Life is about... Well, I mean, would you? Because of in the same way that we can't appreciate life because of, if we were immortal, death gives life meaning. So too does sadness give happiness meaning. I think we need to experience the whole point of existence, in my view, not to get too deeply philosophical to sign things off, is to experience the whole spectrum of emotion. I think a life well lived is one that has experienced all of the horrendous and wonderful emotions and scenarios at which life can throw at you. And so, but no one promised us that. No one said you're going to remain happy. And I think that to me sounds like the idea of hell, actually, is to experience nothing but joy. That would be awful if you really think about it. But moreover, I think, strength, to your point, real strength is not only that ability to keep going and, to keep moving forward, but I think more importantly, to not be like, oh, poor me, right? Poor me, like, I've just gone through shit again. Guys, look at me. Isn't life unfair? That, I think, is even more important. Because if like you said, in that example of being hit and knocked down, if that person's just going, oh, why is it every time I get up, I get punched? This isn't fair. This isn't fair. It's like, well, you can get up and you can keep getting up and you're going to keep getting punched. But, at some point, you're going to beat yourself. Like, actually, that's then your real adversary then. It's not any longer the person punching you, it's you. Because if you're just going to beat yourself at that point, it's to, like you say, just get up and go, right, okay, let's go. That's the, I think, real strength that, and not just for founders, like I said, to reiterate, I think in general, because of whether you're a founder or not, life is fucking hard.
True fact.
To be completely frank. Yeah.
Drop the mic.
Sorry, I got a bit deep there towards the end.
No, it's good.
Right, that's it. But
I
no,
agree.
These are, I think it's. Look, I'm always very cognizant as well. Sorry, because I know we've gone way over, but I'm just always very cognizant as well in the conversations that we have that, it's not just founders that listen to this show. It's people who are interested in becoming founder, people who are entrepreneurial, or just professionals, whoever, right? And I always get really cognizant of the fact that as founders, we sit here and we talk about what it is to be a founder and entrepreneur. And I think we run the risk of coming across a little bit wanky sometimes, of like talking
Agreed.
about ourselves as founders like we are these holier than thou kind of like, omniscient sort of creatures. And it's like, no, we're not. We're just people who are stupid enough or crazy enough, or maybe the right combination of both, to do this thing. Doesn't make us better than anyone. It just means that, we're doing this thing. And in fact, most of the lessons that we learn along the way, affords us this opportunity to be quite self-reflective. And I think those lessons are useful for everyone, like not just founders, for everyone, because everyone goes through ups and downs, and we just happen to experience that sometimes at a slightly heightened level, sometimes in a much more condensed time frame, but not always. There are plenty of people experiencing that too who aren't founders. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, I just like to keep myself grounded. You know what I mean?
And like
I don't want to be
earlier,
one of those founders.
Heaven forbid we don't want all founders out there. Like, the world would come to a grinding halt
Right.
if it had a bunch of lunatics coming up with the next big idea the whole time. I'm a big believer that
Exactly.
Everybody brings their own thing to the table, and thank God it's all different.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, a founder can't bring an amazing, crazy idea into life without people willing to be passionately working hard to help that be executed. So we need everyone involved, top to bottom, and everyone's vital in that process. So yeah, absolutely. Cool. Awesome. Well, look, I'm going to let you go because I've taken up so much of your time, and I really appreciate you indulging my nonsense at the end there a little bit.
Not at all.
And going over slightly. So I'll thank you. You're too kind. So look, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. It's been great speaking to you again. I enjoy all our conversations when we speak. So, and it's super exciting to what you're doing. I'm going to put links to MyArc, your LinkedIn, down below so people can check you out and check MyArc out. Is there anywhere else people should be checking you out? Anything else that should be putting down in the description?
No, the big one really is we mainly focus on LinkedIn because we do B2B rather than anything else. So that's where all of our information gets shared, and where I am a lot of the time.
Oh, awesome. Well, look, thanks again so much. Have a wonderful rest of your week, and I really hope we get to catch up again soon.
Awesome. Cheers, Greg.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening and/or watching. Please like and subscribe, or if you are listening via podcasting service and want to show your support, consider rating or leaving a review. It really helps. See you next week.